quick top 5 list here. Haven't done a top 5 in a while. I'm hoping to get back into the top 5 lists. Maybe they're interesting, maybe they're not. Hopefully they'll be controversial, or at least mildly so. Right? I mean, how controversial can computing be? And I've been feeling more and more passionate about Illumos recently, and thought maybe take a look at 5 reasons you might want to be using Illumos. And implicit in that is instead of Linux, right? For your whatever server you're going to run. And admittedly, many of these items will also apply to FreeBSD, but I think FreeBSD gets plenty of support. So, not that Illumos doesn't. I'm rambling, right? It's only 4 in the morning, and I'm already a little delirious. Number 5, DTrace. DTrace is super cool. If you haven't used it, play around with it. As a programmer, even working in Perl, you can do DTrace with Perl, which is super cool. I work in other languages too, but DTrace is that other bit you want to add to your bag of tricks. You got logging, debugging, and DTrace, and it's super cool. Can solve a lot of problems. Fantastic. So DTrace came out of Solaris. Illumos natural home for it. Number 4, ZFS. The kind of Swiss Army knife, do everything file system that's like the next generation. It makes the other file systems seem antiquated by comparison. And by other file systems, I mean things like XFS and Extended 4 and UFS. ZFS is super cool. Just to be able to do hierarchical settings for compression on data sets, be able to quickly create data sets, move them around, and one of my favorites is snapshotting and volumes. So if you're playing around with things like virtualization or emulators, snapshotting and volumes are fantastic. 3, Crossbow. This is the network virtualization. And again, another, Solarisism that Illumos does really well. Again, virtualization, emulation, this is critical. So something that, go look at the SimH README or something to say, oh, here are the steps to do a bridge on Linux. Versus it's Illumos, create a linked VNIC. That's it. So, Crossbow, fantastic. Related to that, number 2, Zones, OS level virtualization. Faster than full system virtualization. Zones are also incredibly secure. Great way to segregate stuff, either for resource-wise or security-wise, or simply organizationally. Zones are fantastic, and a couple of Illumos distributions, so SmartOS and OmniOS. Maybe others have this now. Leave a comment if they do. LX zones, so running an OS virtualized full Linux distribution, almost full, to be able to run Linux binaries. I am having great success using a closed source compiled alpha system emulator inside an LX zone. It's faster than if I was doing, say, a KVM or VirtualBox virtualization of it. And because it's in a zone, I don't have to worry that it's some commercial product that I can't see what the code is doing, right? Because sometimes you worry, especially an emulator, if you get one, man, what are they doing under the hood? So LX zones and zones, both very, very powerful technologies. Honorable mention has to go to SmartOS from Joyent. SmartOS has really turned me on to stuff. It's kind of a little bit specialized, right? You wouldn't run it on your workstation. It is a hypervisor operating system, so its goal is to run zones, including LX zones and KVM machines, right? So full system virtualization and OS virtualization. And it does so really, really well, and it does JSON in and out. It is fantastic, it's fast, and it uses these underlying technologies we talked about earlier that were early on in the list, Crossbow, Zones, and ZFS to full effect, right? So you boot off a USB key or USB stick, and your whole disk array is dedicated to running your zones, and it is fast, very, very fast. And when I mean fast, it's not just the performance of the virtualization, which obviously it is, but fast to stand up a new VM, because your VM instantiation is a JSON document, or it's an object. It's easy to interact with programmatically, or even through typing manually. And let's move on to the final, which is that it is different. Um, there is developing in, I guess, in business computing and across the board. If you want a Unix-like operating system, it is going to be Linux. And having been through almost the start of watching Linux, right? I started using Linux back when your distribution choices was like MCC and one out of Texas A&M. Maybe was SLS around? I don't know. I digress. I think I did MCC first, and then SLS came out a few months later. Is that back then that was the hip, cool thing to use, right? Now it's the boring, you know, unadventurous IT managers is what they choose. They choose Linux, right? They're like, oh, it's got to be Red Hat or Ubuntu. Where the bold move is to do Illumos, right? We saw the technical advantages, right? So items 5 through 2, all technical advantages, right? Why would you choose Linux, right? Is it one of the is it fear that you don't want to try something new? Is it a matter of support? I don't know. Um, but I'm reminded of the situation in the 80s where you had your PCs, your Macs, and your Amigas. Why did the Amiga lose out? I know there's lots of stuff we can get into about marketing and bad decisions that were made at Commodore, but the Amiga was the technically superior machine, right? I mean, you had these tiny little Macintoshes with these tiny little monochrome displays, or grayscale, and you had an Amiga that was a fraction of the price with, full color, actual sort of multitasking. There were some issues with multitasking early on, but yeah, it was a fraction of the price and in color. Why would you choose the Macintosh, right? Plus, the games were a lot better on an Amiga. And one could you could see, okay, the PC, similar situation, right? They were expensive, especially before, I guess the clones were out in the 85, but they were still kind of pricey. Amiga, I think, beat the price. Amiga 500 was a pretty cheap machine, but people still chose a PC or a Mac, by and large, right? And we may be getting into a similar situation, and I don't want this to be taken wrong. I love Linux. I run Linux. I will continue to be using Linux, especially for things like laptops, whatever. Although Triblix works great on one of my other dev laptops, but I don't want to see this. I want to see the usage of Illumos increase, right? And I think it will solve a lot of people's problems, both in a business production world, or not business production, but kind of an enterprise setting, but also at the small office, home office thing, right, where Linux had a foothold. But you see, Linux used to be the hip, cool thing to use, right? That was what was different, right? I mean, everyone was doing Windows NT at that point. I think it was Sun, kind of the holdout of the traditional Unix vendors. Like I think DEC they were trying to sell NT machines. Alpha ran NT. I don't know about HP. Maybe HP and Sun were both holdouts to say, like, hey, real Unix is better, right? And maybe we're having the same thing now with Linux as the new Windows. I don't know. But I guess I'll wrap it up, because this is going to go down a long road of me griping about Windows, which is not what this is about. This is about that Illumos is super cool, and if you haven't already tried it, give it a try. And depending on what you're trying to do, there are different distributions of Illumos, right? So I'm sure there's one for everyone out there. And again, happy Independence Day. It's 4th of July here in the U.S.